welcome and thank you for coming. In addition to thanking all of you, I'd like to thank our sponsors profusely for supporting us in this first year. And a special shout out to the Adirondack Trust Company, Stewart's Shops, Price Chopper 32, and a number of other wonderful donors throughout our community. We could not do it without them. Also, Saratoga Arts, their community grant was instrumental. Please help me welcome and thank our authors whose time and generosity during these uncertain times contributed the most to making this festival such a success. This particular program is presented by the Whispering Angels of Saratoga Springs, an organization that provides programs for at-risk LGBTQ+ young people in memory of Mary Jo Driscoll, a founding member of this organization. Mary Jo, I will add anecdotally, is a friend of mine and was an avid reader, and I know she would be so happy to see all of you here for this session. With us here today are two women who write about young women emerging into adults, a process that is sometimes wild and a little messy. Rory Power is the New York Times best-selling author of Wilder Girls and Burn Our Bodies Down. She grew up in New England, where she lives and works as a crime fiction editor and story consultant for TV adaptation. She received a master's in prose fiction from the University of East Anglia and thinks fondly of her time there, partially because she learned a lot, but mostly because there were a lot of bunnies on campus. That can come up in the Q&A section if you want. Jennifer Dugan is a writer, a geek, and a romantic who writes the kinds of stories she wishes she'd had growing up. She's the author of Some Girls Do, Verona Comics, and Hot Dog Girl, which has been called a great fizzy rom-com by Entertainment Weekly, and one of the best reads of the year, hands down, by Paste Magazine. She lives in upstate New York with her family, dog, bearded dragon, a new kitten, and her evil yet beloved cat that is no doubt planning to take over the world. Welcome, our authors.
Thank you so much for having us, by the way. Are these on? Can you guys hear us good? Okay, awesome. So we're so happy to be here. Rory actually just drove straight in from Providence.
It's just me, Jessica, but I really want to keep her cats.
This is true. Our cats are like cousins. So we thought we would ask each other some questions about our writing, and then save some time at the end for Q&A, so if anybody has questions. And then if anybody has books or anything, we are happy to sign them after. So as you mentioned, I am Jennifer Dugan. I am the author of Some Girls Do, Verona Comics, and Hot Dog Girl. All of my books feature queer main characters, typically bi girls, who are, as I like to call them, they're disaster bis. So they don't really have it all together. They're definitely messy. They make a lot of bad choices. But that's part of growing up, and I really feel that just because, you don't always have it all together, you don't always know the best thing, it doesn't make you any less deserving of love and family and compassion. And so that's like a big theme that I try to get through my books.
And I'm Rory. I write kind of thrillery, horror-y books, mostly about young women without adult supervision. A lot of like bleeding and vomiting, that's kind of my vibe. And I write a lot too about the landscape and how we can see it reflect both our experiences and how it has changed over time, sort of the influence of climate change, and what we can look forward to with that.
I think collectively we kind of run the gamut of disaster girls. So first, to just dive in, how do you define a messy girl in the context of your work? And is there a character of yours that you think of as being emblematic of this?
I think my favorite thing about this kind of character that we're going to talk a lot about is that everything they do drives the story, but particularly in a negative way. Like, I like those moments where you realize, where the reader is like, you really should not have done that, but the character takes maybe a little bit longer to realize that, and I love the kind of like, oh no moments where it's just like slow motion and you realize you've set everything in motion yourself, and everything bad that is happening is actually your own fault. I love that. So that's that's the hallmark of a messy girl for me, is like, none of this would have happened if you just sat there, but you didn't, so here we are. And if there's one character that I've written that is like that the most, I think it would have to be the main character of my first book, Water Girls. Her name is Henny. She, there's a fence that she is really not supposed to go past. So she goes past the fence and she doesn't really check the box that she should check. And I love that, because it really comes back to bite her in the end. That's my favorite thing, but it just comes back. What about you, though?
So I think our definitions are pretty similar. I think you really summed up all of the characters of my books by your definition. I just really love to see characters. I think it's, I think when you're young adults, it's a time of growth that's not necessarily linear. And so a lot of times you need to go down the wrong path and then reverse, and that's kind of how you learn how to be an adult and a good person. And you don't always have, especially if you don't have a strong like family unit around you, you're not always given all of those skills out of the bat. And so I think there's something to really be said for characters like that who are making mistakes and learning and growing and trying to figure stuff out, which is a big thing in the character arcs throughout my book. We start as disasters, and we usually end up as slightly less disasters, but we've learned a lot of lessons.
The whole time.
Yeah. Yours trend is down,
yeah.
And they just stay until there's bears and stuff. I think working in contemporary, I have a lot of, when you're working in more speculative, it can happen on like a bigger scale, whereas mine is more of like these tiny earthquakes that really can like shake you to the core of who you are, but not necessarily fighting a monster bear, which are some of the consequences that her girls would get into. And then I think for me, my ultimate messy girl would have to be also from my debut, Lou from Hot Dog Girl, who is the girl stuck in a hot dog suit, working at an amusement park, and pretty much every decision she makes is the wrong decision, but she fully and truly believes with all her heart she is making the right decision. And so that just watching the paths that she goes through, readers really have that moment where they're like, this is not great. And she's like, no, this is going to be totally fine. And everyone in the book and every reader is like, this is not going to be fine, but she doesn't care. Because she's in a hot dog suit. What does she really have to lose at that moment?
Right, she's already at her low.
Right.
But what, also, I have my questions on my phone. I'm not just being rude, but also
She's on TikTok right now.
But also the only person I would text is Jen. She's already here. So, what drew you though to writing these kinds of characters? Do you find that it's a conscious choice that you're making when you set out to build a new one, or is it just like, oh look, we've got another one?
Well, they say write what you know, right? So I was definitely a disaster when I was a teen, and I think a lot of times we're even disasters into adulthood. We don't really have it all figured out all the time. So I'm really drawn to that. I think especially when you're dealing with characters like that, it gives you a lot of room to play. There's a lot of directions they can go. They're not always following the expected path. And I just really want to represent for other kids that were growing up like I did, that you can still have a happy ending, because a lot of times there's a gap between who you are and who you want to be, and there's a learning process to get there, and I'm really writing for those kids that are kind of in the middle, and those teens that are in that place. And so that's really where my characters are born out of, is just, you know, that's just, I think, what I'm most interested in. I don't know that I actually sit down and think that I'm gonna do it, but that's what the universe always gives me. What about you?
I'm sort of similar. I feel like I watched the Gone Girl movie at a really impressionable age, which is like, that's what I'm doing with my life now. But yeah, like I'm always drawn to the parts of story arcs that are the worst. Like, I'll watch like the arc in a TV series where like they're having a breakup and then I'll just stop and try to get back together because I like to watch things fall apart. It's like, that's what I'm gonna write about. Otherwise, I'll get bored.
And this is the same author who makes fun of me for reading like hurt comfort fanfic because I want it to have a happy ending.
I just stop at the hurt. Like, that's it. That's all you.
No.
We write very different experiences into our books, but I think we approach character in a similar way, which is interesting. That these are just sort of the girls through which we can tell the stories that we're interested in telling. Yeah.
So how have your characters evolved through your work? Do you find yourself exploring questions of unlikability and messiness in new ways?
This is interesting actually because so for the past like year and a half I've been working on a book that the release date is, I have to finish it first so we don't know.
TBD.
But it's been interesting for me working on this main character in this new book who is like just balls to the wall, forgive the expression. Like she is everything that I've done, it's just dialed up even further, and I feel like that's sort of the progression that I've gone through. Is in my first book, it was like, we did a bad thing, but it was a mistake, oh no. And the second one's like, I'm considering my choices, and I'm choosing to do the thing that is maybe not great for everyone, but is rad for me. And in the third one, she's just immediately like, you're gonna hate me, and that's the whole point. I don't need a character to be likable, I just need you to be interested in her. And I think so the more I write, the more I lead into that. And maybe I'll swing back the other way eventually. Who knows? What about you? How do your main characters compare?
Yeah, I think, well, when I started writing Hot Dog Girl, I really loved Blue. I still love Blue, but I was very surprised by some of the reactions to her, where people thought that she was like very annoying and very, you know, that she was mean, which is just hilarious to me because I thought I was actually writing this really like powder puff disaster girl in a hot dog suit. And she grew to become a very dynamic character, but she is also frustrating in the way that you said. So then when I wrote my second book, I was, you know, I had that in my head as I was revising, but I already had that book done. So when I wrote Some Girls Do, which came out this past May, was the first time where I was really drafting a book with that kind of stuff in my head. And I was like, wow, I can take everything these people are saying and really adjust, kind of. And then instead, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna make two messy girls. So Some Girls Do is a dual POV story where we have two very complicated girls leading, and we're seeing two perspectives of the same story and the way their decisions impact not only each other, but also the whole arc. So that was really, it was kind of like dialing it up the way that you did also. I think we just at this point are really leaning into these kind of complicated, dynamic girls.
And you've written from a girl's point of view, also your second book had a boy's point of view as well. And so I'm interested in how we can write the same kinds of characters, but depending on their gender expression, they're labeled differently. So we get people who present masculine being labeled an anti-hero or complex, or like interesting, complicated, and girls often, or people presenting feminine often get sort of unlikable is the big one. But annoying is another one that you've already mentioned. So I was wondering, how have you experienced that in your own work? Because you've worked with a lot of different modes.
Well, Verona Comics was very eye-opening because the bigger of the two disasters in that book is the boy. His name is Ridley. So Verona Comics is, for anyone who doesn't know, a very loose Romeo and Juliet retelling, almost like a Romeo and Juliet fix-it, where we do discuss how toxic that relationship is. This isn't, Romeo and Juliet is not a healthy, happy romance. It is a tragedy. So I wanted to kind of explore that toxic romance and the codependency and give it a modern twist. What has been very fascinating is that not fascinating, completely expected actually, is that, when I was writing The Boy in Verona Comics, and to this day, I still get a lot of letters from people who are saying, like, I want to wrap him in a blanket, and I want to feed him soup, and I just wish I could wrap him up in bubble wrap. And I'm like, this is a disaster boy who lies, who doesn't tell her his identity in the beginning. We have all of those same beats. But meanwhile, Jubilee, my girl, I'm still getting like, well, she's obsessed with her cello, which is her big ambition. And, and she's obsessive, and she's naggy. And I'm like, so we have this driven teen girl who meets this boy and kind of it derails the path that she's on. And then this boy is getting all of this love, and we must protect him and take care of him.
Their hobbies.
Right.
Ugh.
Yes.
The cello.
I know.
How could you?
So it definitely, the public reception is definitely very different because we do give. Especially in Kid Lit, we give boys a lot more passes. Male characters, we have like Kaz Brecker, who from Six of Crows, who would rather, remove someone's eyeball than say, I love you, and it scared me that you were hurt. And everyone draws these like fan arts of him, like this sweet, gentle little boy that needs hugs and love. And I'm like, he needs therapy, is what he needs. And a lot of it. And so it's very interesting the way that we will perceive a masculine presenting character with the same faults as a feminine presenting character.
I think the solution is just more characters should pull out characters' eyeballs. Like,
We could that's just
equal opportunity.
equal.
Eyeball removal.
Yes.
That's my approach to things. Like,
It works better in speculative than it does in
That's
contemporary rom-coms, though. There's not too many problems that I could safely solve. I can't think of any problems, actually.
Yeah, for sure.
If she finished her shift in a hot dog suit, and then...
But I agree with you. I found a very similar thing. Most of my books, the main cast is are cis women. But there's like two, I think, two boys that I've written, and both of them have gotten some responses that are like, why are they in the story more? I'm like, because they're not important. I don't know which one. It doesn't matter. But I mean, sorry. Don't go back, maybe.
Yeah, I get Nick from Hot Dog Girl gets a lot of fan mail. A lot of people want my promises that he lived happily ever after. And I used to write back and be like, he does, he opens up a cupcake shop, it's really great, he has a nice, and then I'm like, whatever you think happens to Nick is what happens to Nick. So we both write about queerness and queer characters. How does this complicate questions of unlikability in your work?
There's an expectation, I think, for a lot of queer characters that they be not perfect, but that they behave in a way that is palatable to everybody. And that's a really tough expectation to put on any kind of character. So I think it only makes it worse in a way, but it also just makes it that much more fun to write a relationship between two queer girls that is absolutely horrible. Like, we deserve that too. We deserve terrible relationship representation. That's my approach. It is the Gone Girl approach, which is like, we should be able to see women as horrible villains as well. That is also feminism. So in this way, I'm similarly approaching my work with queer characters. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's a big part of why, I think a lot of the reason why we're supposed to see like LGBT plus as in the most palatable dose that we can is a lot of the same reasons why girls get called unlikable, because girls are also supposed to be very palatable and very, the caregivers and the nurturers, and they're supposed to mature faster and all those kind of things. And so I think it's almost shocking when they don't. But I do think that we're past the point, especially in the queer conversations, where everything has to be kind of like toned down and very easy and accessible. Because I think that we do need these stories of not every, now I say this as someone who writes rom-coms and romance and loves it, but not every queer story has to be this happy love Simon on a Ferris wheel romance. I think just as women and female presenting people are not a monolith, I think we have the same thing with queer, and then when you add a disaster girl and also her queerness in, I think there's something very exciting and liberating about that. You don't have to fit in this little box. You don't always have to live up to these expectations that are put on you to make other people comfortable.
You talked about this a little bit already, but how has the process of receiving feedback from readers influenced your work? Like, do you find yourself writing in conversation with it, or does it make you sort of retreat even further from that kind of feedback? How does that influence you, if it does at all?
Yeah, well, I learned my lesson from Hot Dog Girl, and I try to stay off Goodreads because that is not for authors, that is for readers. But yeah, there is a lot of noise, and it was really hard. I think Some Girls Do was really, like I said, the first book that I had to write with all of the noise in my head, and it was very difficult to get to a point where I could kind of shut it down and respect my own space and tell the story that I want to do. When I do find myself thinking about things, I mean, obviously there is some feedback that is good feedback. I would never want to write representation that was hurtful or problematic, or, so feedback like that, of course, I would want brought to my attention. But just in general, like, can you just write a soft, like, would it kill you to write a soft, quiet, gentle girl? I'm like, it might, like, but let's not find out. So yeah, I think I've become very protective of the spaces that I work in. What about you?
It's been super interesting to me, because something I've realized as I hear opinions on my work and also read opinions on work that I loved or really appreciated is figuring out what sort of things I care about in a story that other people don't, and vice versa. Like, I'll read a review and someone will be like, why did they answer this question? I'm like, I didn't know we were doing that. Like, that's, I didn't pay attention to that at all. And that happens for reviews of my own book, where people ask me questions like, what happened with this, what happened with this? And I'm like, oh, I didn't know, I didn't care about that. And I think it's something I hadn't considered before I started writing, which of course it sounds so simple. Like, of course, different people will care about different things. But I really enjoyed sort of realizing my own specificity as a writer, and what things I care about that maybe other writers don't, and what they care about that I don't, and that, like, really finding my niche, I guess, has been really interesting. Yeah, like, there'll be endings of books where I'm like, I am so happy you stopped there because I didn't want to know anything else, and then other people are like, no, I really wanted to know. And I just think that's so interesting that, like, people could look at one text and have such varied reactions. So that's been a really interesting and favorite thing about feedback for me.
Yeah, I think now that you say that, Verona Comics has a little bit more of an open-ended, ending, and people really do want to know where they end up. And so when I was writing Melt With You, which is my book that comes out next year, I actually...
next year, Jen?
What?
When next year? Is it available for pre-order?
It is
It
available
is?
for pre-order.
When did I get that?
It will be out May 17th of 2022.
Oh.
And it is an ice cream truck disaster by rom-com, road trip rom-com. And in this one, this is not a spoiler, I do give an epilogue in this one, so you guys can see. You flash forward about a month. I'm not going to tell you where they are next year. I give you a month, all right? What do you want? But I did make it a point because I was like, people really want to know what happens after, you have that epic rom-com moment, right? And we all know that's part of it. And that's what I love about writing romance is that we know where we're going to get. There are certain tropes and expectations, but how we get there, it happens in such fun and unusual and different ways. And so, yes, I did actually. That was kind of in response to feedback, is that I did give you a little glimpse of the future.
Like 5 weeks next time?
That's too far.
Okay, 4 weeks.
4 weeks is the cutoff. Like, I'll just let you know that they didn't break up that night, but anything beyond that is up to, like, your imaginations. So on a more general level, how do you approach character creation? What is your process there?
I think some people do character first, like they have, like a person pops into their head, and that is not me. I am like a landscape first person, and I figure out where I want to be, and then I figure out what kind of person would have a reason to go into the places that I personally would like to go to. So for my first book, it's set at a boarding school that has been quarantined, which I wrote in like 2016. I did not know that word was going to become like a thing. And
I didn't even think.
I know, somebody asked me if it was about, I was like, no! I was like 22, having that. But yeah, it's a boarding school, an old house, and I wanted to go to the third floor. So I needed somebody who would go to the third floor. So I had a character get not abducted, what's the word I'm looking for? She's, imprisoned, maybe. How would you describe it? She's sick and she's taken upstairs. Anyway.
I mean, she is sort of in prison.
Yeah, she's not happy to be there. So I had someone who would need to go upstairs. That's really like my whole decision process. And then I make it detailed and like an actual person, hopefully. But it's very like reverse engineered for me. But what about you? Do you do that, or are you like more character first?
No, that is the weirdest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. I mean, it makes sense because
I want a little video game person.
Like
go around.
Knowing you, this makes sense, but I don't know how this is landing with our audience who doesn't spend every night watching movies with you. No, that is weird. I am definitely diving into my characters. Usually I start with the idea for a scene, and it'll just come to me, and I'll just think of like the way that you think of like, well, I want to go to the third floor. I will just think of a random scene, and it might even be just 2 seconds long, and I'm like, somebody's taking a shower, and they're really mad at this girl, which was one of the first scenes that I got in my head of Verona Comics. And then I'm like, okay, who is this person in my head, and why are they mad, and how did they get there? And then from there, I kind of write the story backwards and forwards.
What floor is the shower on, and do I want to go downstairs?
Yeah, so I guess, or it'll just be, I had another one that started also in the shower, weirdly, and they saw like a hair that was like, the other person's hair was like stuck on the wall of the shower, and I was like, why do they notice this? What kind of person would even be staring at that?
Girl too?
No.
Oh, oops.
No. Yeah. What was the first scene for that? I don't remember.
Well, actually, when you're writing this kind of thing, what is your more like general process? Like, is there a place you like to sit? Is there like a snack that you must have? Do you work at a certain time of day?
No.
Oh, okay, cool.
No, I have kids, so you can't have any of that stuff when you have kids. I write a lot of my books sitting in parking lots while they are doing extracurriculars.
They're athletes, and I have volunteered over and over again to cut their legs off, but you do not go for it. I don't know why.
No, as hard as it is to have two extremely athletic kids, which I cannot, I'm like, how did I birth you? I do prefer them to keep their legs. But yeah, a lot of my writing time is whenever I can fit it in, wherever I can fit it in. I do have an office spa area in my home, which always feels like such a treat when I actually get to sit down there and work. But a lot of the times I'm writing anywhere. I would say most of my writing is done in the front seat of my Jeep while I'm waiting for someone. What about you?
I have no kids. I have one cat, and she hates me. So,
It's actually true.
I work from like 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. maybe, but then also at like 4 a.m. if I'm awake, which I am. I aspire to have a routine and to be one of those people with like the desk and everything, but no, I don't do that. I need to be shamed, so I go work in public where some people can see my computer screen, so that if they see me just like watching a YouTube video, they're like, why did you come here to do that? So I have to go to public and make myself vulnerable. Unfortunately.
And that works because
I mean, no, but
because I'm just thinking maybe I should get out of my car because I will be working for like 15 minutes and then I'm like, my brother sends me a TikTok and then it's a good downward spiral.
yeah, but don't let her fool you. She works so fast and so hard all the time. And she'll text me and be like, I just wrote 4 books today. And I'm like, cool, I watched 90 episodes of Real Housewives of New York. And I have a lot of thoughts. You're going to have to hear them all right now.
That is actually how most of our conversations go.
Yeah.
Because I write, in addition to writing young adult novels, I also write comics and graphic novels.
When's your next graphic novel out, Jen? Or your first one?
Yeah, my graphic novel will be coming out from Penguin Teen. We don't have the exact date yet. Pre-orders are not up. I know that's where we were going next. But it'll be coming out next year. So next year I'll have 2 books. I'll have a queer witch book set in upstate New York, and it'll be out next August or September. So just about a year from now. Just before Halloween time. So maybe next year I'll be back talking about that one. Right? Because they said October 22nd. So.
Perfect time.
So what are some other books that you would recommend for people who love our Disaster Girls? I do get asked for a lot of recommendations all the time. Where do you send readers?
I love Megan Abbott. Megan Abbott is my favorite in the whole world. Dare Me is just the best book, and she does a lot of work. I think they're technically adult books, but they work a lot with sort of these same kinds of characters, young women who are on the verge of something else, a new stage in their life. And she writes so compellingly, I feel, about the dynamic between girls, both on a friendship level and on a queer level. And I think her prose is also really compelling to me. She does really interesting things with rhythm that I always am really attracted to, just on a sentence level. So she's my always recommendation. Like, you could ask me any question, what book you recommend, like, what fantasy series? And I'd be like, let me tell you how Megan Abbott, who writes about cheerleaders, is actually writing a fantasy series.
I think that's really interesting because I think that your writing is actually very like rhythmic and lyrical.
I try.
And
Megan
I
Abbott
really,
just
I'll have to check this out because I really think that you are like at the top.
Fair enough. What
So
book would you recommend? Where do you send people?
I send people all over the place. So I would say if you're looking, if you enjoy my books and you're looking for something along those lines, Dahlia Adler wrote a book called Cool for the Summer, which came out, I want to say it came out in April, but it was right around the same time. It has another disaster by lead, trying to kind of figure out her summer. It's just phenomenal. Another one I really love is Last Chance Books by Kelsey Rodkey. And that one has dueling bookstores so the two love interests, their parents each own, well, one is working for their aunt, but their parental figures each own a bookstore. And so they're sort of trying to put each other out of business and not fall in love. And they're kind of failing on both fronts. So that is another like deliciously complicated girl main character. Right. How are we for time? I just want to make sure we leave time for Q&A.
Well, it's 2:09.
So I think we have like 20 minutes left?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it's at 2:30.
So next year,
Yeah.
which I just mentioned, Coven is coming out, which is my spooky, speculative, kind of dipping my toe. It's still very much like a Jen Dugan book. Like you're going to get a lot of awkward teenagers, awkward texting. But I'm kind of dipping my toe into your waters a little bit. Would you ever want to come over to mine and write some kind of funny rom-com?
I'm not funny.
That's not
Funny writing is so hard. It is so hard to be funny on the page, and I think I threw in like one joke into my first book, and my editor flagged it and was like, "What's this?" I was like, "Uh-oh, that's not a good sign." So I don't know that it would be very good. I would try, but I think it would probably go off the rails like 60 pages in.
There would be like an eyeball removal.
Or it would just be like, you would think you would be able to tell that what I really wanted was to be reading someone else's book that was this.
Fair.
Yeah, I feel like my heart would be in it. I feel like I'm not right for you. You're not right for me. You're not funny enough. I don't know how you do jokes. Do you ever get your editor being like, this isn't funny, or is that just like a me thing that I have to go through?
I mean, I don't want to sound bratty, but no.
Okay.
No, and my next, so Melt With You, which is my next rom-com out in the spring, is so full of, so the girls are in an ice cream truck called Love at First Bite, and every ice cream flavor is like romance book or romance movie themed. So I have so many puns in that book. It's
Ask me for help, and I would give you suggestions. Did any of them make it in?
yes, some of your puns make it.
That's
So
funny.
that is like, yeah, the tagline for the book is like it's gonna be a rocky road. Like we really be in on ice cream puns. Yeah.
Well, I don't get to do that. As far as, you don't have to advise me on how to write a joke, but what advice would you give to like a starting out writer or someone who wants to get into writing and potentially publishing?
There's so many thoughts running through my head right now. It's a hard industry. I think that was very surprising to me, was that I thought it was just going to be, you write this book and you publish this book and you send it out. But there's actually, marketing meetings and there's it is just such a business that I think it's just to, definitely go in and knowing that it's not just going to be about the art. You're going to be dealing with a lot of different dynamics and things like that. So, but the first thing you really need to do, I think the best advice is just write the book. Because you can't, you have to start there and you have to kind of take feedback and keep going. Hot Dog Girl is my debut, but it was the 6th novel that I wrote. So I think that is the best advice, is to just keep going and write the story that you want to tell. Because that was also the first book that was really voicey and really like my personality. And like me before that, I was trying to, Rory knows this story, but my first book that I ever wrote. And
I forgot it. What was it?
Oh, good. Well, I sent it out. So I sent it out to agents, which is the first step in getting published. And I was like, here is this amazing novel for you. And I comped it. So you need these comps when you send it, and that proves that you know where your book goes. And those are other books and other authors that your book is like and that you might be shelved with. So my comps for this first book was James Joyce.
Oh my God, I forgot.
Yep, and Nick Hornby, which are really, at the forefront of young adult literature. And I had no agents were like, no, we're not going to do this. You don't have to send me any more pages. I am good. So I think that's really my advice, is to just really embrace. And then suddenly it took me that long. It took me 5 more books to really embrace my own voice and the story that I want to tell, and stop writing about like boys having midlife crisis, and so start writing about these complicated girls and women. And then as soon as I did that, all the doors really opened up. So embrace your voice and don't give up, and don't comp James Joyce ever.
Yeah, that is a hard one to really work with in the current market. I think similar to embracing your voice, I think my advice is like trusting your gut and learning how to do that, because when you're getting so much feedback from a lot of people you trust and admire and respect, like it can be really hard to hear your own voice in that. And there's a balance between taking no feedback and taking all of it. And it's hard to find, but it's like, if you have that little voice in the back of your head that's like, this is not right, or like, I should really be doing this instead, you're usually right, not always, but like, it's there for a reason, or so I have found, anyway. Maybe someone else is out there like, no, I'm dead wrong, all the time.
Yeah, I mean, if you're dead wrong all the time, you might want to look into like maybe being an accountant or something else, if your inner voice is constantly leading you astray. But yeah, I think you definitely need to be able to take feedback, but know when enough is enough. Another thing I see with new writers and young writers is that they will revise the same story forever. And I was the same way. But there comes a certain point where you're like, I have to let this go.
Oh, I'm a huge advocate for giving up. I mean, that sounds bad, but like, I love to quit. I love to not do things.
It's such a good role model.
And, take a break.
Rory Power.
People are like, oh, I work so hard, I can't take a break. I'm like, that's all I do. My base state is taking a break.
Well, that went off the rails. All right, so I have like one more kind of a funny question, and then we'll do Q&A. So how do you think your characters would react if they were dropped into one of my rom-coms?
I mean, the girls in my first book who have been under quarantine, they're just like, we have running water, all about that. Yeah, working, plumbing, electricity, they would be having a great time in your books. Most everybody else that I write about has access to these utilities, but they would still be like intrigued by consistent schooling and adults being present around them. I think that would be very interesting. But they would probably also like chafe at that a little and be like, no, I can drive this pickup even though I don't drive stick. Like, you're not in the driver's seat, this is mine. I feel like I know what your answer for the reverse is gonna be. Like, they might just die, but I wanted to check with you first.
Yeah, I think overall most of them probably would just die. That was going to be my answer. Mm-hmm. I don't know though. I feel like Ridley and Jubilee might make friends with the bear in Wilder Girls. I feel like they just have such gentle energy that maybe they could team. She wrote this great bear, and it has become this huge running joke, highlight of my life. Whenever I see any bear content, I immediately send it to her.
I get a lot of that. I also get a lot of lobster and crab content in my way, just generally speaking, because there's some thematically significant crab.
Yes, for anyone who's read Wilder Girls, that will make sense. But yeah, I think overall they probably wouldn't. They might survive burn our bodies down and just be terrified.
Nebraska's not that bad.
Yeah, Nebraska. So I think they have a real shot in her second book. In her first book, I think we're going down very quickly.
I agree. Yeah.
I know that I've had a chance. One more thing, and then I swear we'll do Q&A. I know that I've had a chance to plug the things that I am working on. So, what is coming up next for you?
Next up for me is an adult book. I have my first adult book coming out in April of next year, and it's the first in a fantasy duology that is inspired by my family is from sort of the northern part of Greece, like closer to Albania. It has more of a Balkan vibe than an ancient vibe. Balkan and Ottoman, so it's inspired by Saratoga and that history, and I got to steal first names from my entire extended family. They are in the book, they don't know that, but I just couldn't think of any names. Like, my name's really difficult, so I just told them.
I steal all mine from like Bachelor and Bachelorette franchises.
That's true, you do.
There's so many. Like
She always picks the worst ones.
Well, they're not. Like, in my defense, now that I've said that and come clean, anyone who looks back at Hot Dog Girl, I just want to say that when I wrote that book, neither Nick nor Ari had been bachelors. They were both jilted contestants that I thought were sweet boys. And they let me down. So now it's become a running joke that anytime I steal a bachelor or bachelorette name for my books, they end up becoming like the franchise villains. Yeah. So I think if anybody has any questions for us, we can open up the floor to that.
Sorry, this made a weird noise.
I was just wondering, it's obvious that you two are friends, and I was just wondering how you met and when you hang out, and I want to know more about your friendship.
Should I even tell the real story of like
We first met, you might not remember this, but I do.
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
I think we had gotten our agents at around the same time. We were both on Twitter, and we got put in an agent and authors like group chat thing to like meet new people. And Jen was in there, and she like was super successful right away. So I was like, oh my god, I can't ever talk to her again because I don't have anything going on. Jen has everything going on. So then we didn't talk for like a year.
I did not remember you were in that group chat.
I made a huge impression.
Okay, I just want to say that she is like my best friend. So this is hilarious to me.
We were there together. It's fine.
I was busy being very successful, apparently.
You were! Like 3 days after we got put there, she was like, yeah, my book's sold. And it's like,
That did happen for Hot Dog Girl. Hot Dog Girl did sell in 48 hours, which is not a usual thing.
But then after that, we met at like a similar festival, and then she texted me because she couldn't figure out which. She was watching a movie, she couldn't figure out who was Tara Reid and who was Misha Martin, and I was like, what? They don't look like at all. So that's really it.
Yes, we were at Boston Book Festival, and I knew you from Twitter. I didn't realize we were in this group chat. I just knew that we were Twitter mutuals who talked sometime. I'm sorry about our history. But yeah, I was just sitting in my hotel and I was just really bored, and I'm like, I'm watching this awful horror movie, and everyone in it is blonde, and I have a really horrible time with like recognizing faces. I really need like, when we're watching like horror movies, I need there to be like a blonde and a brunette and like a tall boy.
And even then, it is not enough. It really is not.
Yeah, and so I just kept sending her screenshots, and you know, in retrospect, you could have just been like, who is this person that I barely know that is texting me all these pictures? Is this Tara Reid? Is this one Tara Reid? But somehow out of that grew, and we've been like inseparable ever since.
Yeah, we just text a lot.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Any other questions?
I'm wondering if you've done this kind of a conversation with young girls, or boys, and what feedback you get from them.
I do a lot of teen-only events. I actually, in the before times, every summer, Becky Albertalli, she wrote Simon versus the Homo sapiens Agenda is the book, and it turned into the movie Love, Simon. We usually do a tour together in the summers that are only for teens, and we'll do it through youth groups and libraries, and the teens have to register because so many of our events as young adult authors tend to be full of adults. And we love our adult readers. I'm not saying anything about that, but I think there's something to be said to actually just talking to your target audience. The feedback that I tend to get is I get a lot of girls who are very excited to see that kind of representation, especially queer girls. I mean, I don't want to keep it so gendered between like girls but it does seem to be the majority of my audience is teen girls who are very excited to have this kind of content where they're not, necessarily in this like nurturing caregiver role where they're allowed to be very loud and messy. And what has been your experience?
I mostly have this kind of conversation in like a school setting. One of the girls is sometimes assigned alongside Lord of the Flies, which is another kind of like group, not a boarding school, but an island. They're not having a good time. They like knock someone's glasses off, and that's what I remember. So a lot of times I'll talk about my book in sort of response to that, and the way that the two books differ in terms of depicting like a group of kids left alone, especially when they all identify as one particular gender. And I mean, half of school visits is like kids who are like, please leave, I want to eat lunch. But the other is, yeah, I've mostly encountered readers who are happy to see something new represented, not new, but like in a school curriculum setting, it's something that is a little bit of a counterpoint, and I think I'm just excited to see even more of that, and see, authors of color, queer authors of color, more perspectives represented, and give those students a chance to see that as well.
Yeah, I have to say, when we were writing our debuts, the last 3 years, I think, has really been a gift to teens. Really, in the last 3 years, there's still a long way to go on representation, but in the last 3 years, we're seeing a lot of good queer rep, queer POC, a lot of trans books, although I think we need a lot more. And so those kind of things that when we were writing our debuts, that was a huge point of contention with a lot of the agents that I talked to when I was trying to sell Hot Dog Girl, was they said queer girls don't sell. And at that point, Simon versus the Homo sapiens Agenda was like the top selling paperback in the country. And so it was very frustrating to be told queer girls don't have a place. And I think now we're really, especially this last year, we had so many queer books come out. I think it's just a conversation that we need to keep going, but when we were writing our debut, it was everything was so different, I think. So it's really exciting to see that, my kids, who I have like tweens and teens, are getting to grow up and have all these different experiences through these books that, when I was a kid, certainly were not available, especially if it was an LGBTQ story. It was typically a tragic thing. Although I guess you're not really contributing.
No, I like when they're sad.
Yeah, so you would have had a great time. But yeah, I just think there's definitely a long way to go, but I think the kids are really excited right now. Yeah. We can probably do one last one if anybody's got a burning question.
Okay. So I heard in your bio you went to college, and I'm just wondering if you did, and do you find that was helpful in finding your path as a writer and cementing it, or any thoughts around that experience?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. So I did my undergrad it ended up being English, but not for lack of trying other things. I barely made it. And then I did a graduate degree, a master's, which is a 1-year program, and it was like by no means do you need a master's to be a writer. What I felt I needed at that point was like dedicated time, somebody who was going to be like, you owe me some work, please give me the work. And also it was free because of financial aid, so like that is a huge plus. A lot of grad programs are like prohibitively expensive. So it was useful for me. I found it really rewarding, but I also think that there are so many other ways to improve your writing, to get that time and dedication. So yeah, I wouldn't say you need to at all. And also I feel like a lot of really interesting writers study something completely other than English, and then they get to use that in their work. And meanwhile, I'm like, I don't know anything, but I know what apostrophe is in a Latin text. So, like, I wish that I could study like biology or something. That would be so.
Biology would have actually been very good.
That'd be so smart.
We're doing. Well, just with what you write in your books, there's so much like science in your books. I mean,
it's fake. It's all fake science,
but it could have been real if you studied. Originally I went to school for writing for theater, and I was going to be a playwright, and then halfway through I was like, I actually need to be able to get a job. So I switched, and I actually ended up graduating from the College of St. Rose, which is right in Albany, with a degree in communications, and I focused a lot on public relations and journalism, and I did work at a lot of the local newspapers for a little while, although print is no longer really a lucrative career path. And then I found myself just kind of using that degree in other ways. I was working in business for a really long time because you can, a communication degree kind of just makes it so that you can talk a lot and you can talk very effectively. And there's a lot of things that does that works very well in kind of business management positions. So I do think that a college degree, while I am definitely, especially with the state of student loans, I am a big proponent of not going to college unless you want to go to college, but we do. I have a rule with my children that you are going to go to college or you're going to go to trade school. You're going to do something to like further yourself. But I think one of the things that college is really good at is teaching you how to find answers, because so much of it is self-directed, and you can't always just go to your professor who might have 300 students and say, what is this? How do I mean, to a certain extent you can, but there's a lot of research and a lot of writing and things like that, and I think those are very useful skills for whatever you do in life. So in some regards, I think my degree helped me a lot just because it gave me a really rounded kind of education. But it was not a path for me from like A to B. I did not graduate, which I think you did, right? You graduated and then immediately.
There was like a year and a half in between, but
yeah, no,
I got out of college and was like, I did not make the best use of my time. I should do some more school. Whoops.
So yeah, it's definitely not required if you want to be a writer. I don't know if that's something that you want to do. If you want to be writing or do graphic novels, like I don't think, I think life experience is really a lot more beneficial. But I do think that college helps you find answers and hit deadlines and things that are just useful in general in life. Because I was not learning them in like high school. I think we're actually over our time limit.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you for having us.